Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the studies. In the previous class, we have completed our chapter Constitution, Why and How, and now we are starting the new chapter that is Rights in the Indian Constitution. Actually, this the rights which we are dealing with in this chapter is related to the first chapter only, so there must be some connection between the chapters, then it will be more easy for you to understand the things and memorize the things. When we were talking about constitution, what is the need of constitution? One of the most important need of the constitution was to put limitations on the powers of the government. It is expected from a constitution that it will put some restrictions, put some limitations on the powers of the government so that the government should not misuse its power. So now, what is the most common way used by the makers of different constitutions to put limitations on the powers of the government? The most common way is the inclusion of the Bill of Rights in the constitution. By incorporating this Bill of Rights in a constitution, what the constitution makers do, that they guarantee some rights to the people of India, and these rights, as these rights are guaranteed by the constitution itself, so no one can deprive people of these rights. And if the government also goes against the rights, then also people can go directly in the court. Though there are some situations in which the government can curtail the fundamental rights, but those are very extraordinary situations. In normal time, people are supposed to enjoy their rights. So, your chapter starts with two situations which is given there, and we will discuss those situations. Okay. So you can see that in 1982, during the construction work for Asian Games, the government engaged a few contractors. These contractors employed a large number of very poor construction workers from different parts of the country to build the flyovers and stadiums. These workers were kept in poor working condition and were paid less than the minimum wages decided by the government. So, this is one of the incidents which is being described, that in 1982 there was Asian Game was to be organized in India, and for that purpose the government has to do a lot of construction work, and for that construction work government engaged a few contractors, and these contractors employed workers, and these workers were very poor workers, and they belonged to different parts of the country, and they were construction workers. They were supposed to build the flyovers and stadiums. And what was the working condition of these workers? Their working condition was very very bad, and not only this, they were paid less than the minimum wages which is decided by the government. So this was the situation prevailing at that time. Here one you must know this, that this is not the only incident of this type. This type of incidents are happening all the time in our country. There are various examples of this type of exploitation is being done in our country. So you are just becoming aware of one of those situations. So, and what happened in that situation? What happened? You can see a team of social scientists studied their poor condition and petitioned the Supreme Court. They argued that employing a person to work for less than the minimum prescribed wages amounts to begar or forced labor, which is a violation of the fundamental right against exploitation. The court accepted this plea and directed the government to ensure that thousands of workers get the prescribed wages for their work. So, what happened that the workers were the victim. They were being forced by the contractor to work in a very poor working condition, and they were also paid less than what was decided by the government as minimum wages. But they are the victims still. They are so much so poor, they are so much uneducated, unaware, that they are not knowing their fundamental rights. They are not knowing that their constitution guarantees them some rights against exploitation, and no one has the authority to give them less wages than the minimum wages which is decided by the government. So they are not aware. Sometimes it happens that they are aware also, they are knowing their rights, still they don't prefer to raise their voice because they are poor, they are resourceless, and they know that they can't go against the contractor because of their poverty. So it happens that people used to poor people, the workers like them used to be in that type of situation, and this also generate a high degree of exploitation on the part of contractor. So in this scenario, the responsibility was taken by a group of social scientists as they approached, they petitioned in the Supreme Court regarding the bad working condition and the low wages that they were getting from the contractor, and they plead in the petitioned in the Supreme Court against this, uh, and in this way they acted in the on behalf of the victim. They are not the victim, but they are just acting on the behalf of the victim, and they are petitioning uh, for the public interest, and this is what we call public interest litigation. So the group of social scientists petitioned in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court observed the matter, saw the matter, and it came to the conclusion that yeah, this is the violation of the fundamental right against exploitation, and the court directed the government that it must ensure that all the workers should get the minimum wages for their work. So in this situation, what we find uh, mm, the fundamental right of the workers were snatched from them, but lastly, finally, the law prevailed, the justice prevailed, and they were ensured their um, minimum wages. So, the second situation is given in this. You can read Machal Lalung was 23 when he was arrested. A resident of Chuburi village of Morigaon district of Assam, Machal was charged of causing grievous injuries. He was found mentally too unstable to stand trial and was sent as under trial to Lokpriya Gopinath Bordoloi mental hospital in Tejpur for treatment. So what happened? Machal Lalung, who was 23, he was charged with causing grievous injury to someone, and when the trial was going on at that time, he was mentally not fit, and he could not stand trial. That's why he was sent to the mental hospital for treatment. when he will become after treatment, it was decided, and the process is that if someone is not mentally fit, someone is not able to stand trial because of mental condition, then he or she should be sent to mental hospital. And after the treatment, if he or she becomes mentally fit, then he should come back for the trial, and then there will be decisions, judgment will be delivered by the judge of the court. This is the process. So Machel Lalung was sent to the mental hospital, but and there his treatment was done, and Machel was treated successfully, and doctors wrote twice to jail authorities in 1967 and then in 1996 that he was fit to stand trial, but no one paid any attention. Machal Lalung remained in judicial custody. Under trials are used to remain in judicial custody because the trial is going on against them, so they are supposed to remain in judicial custody. Otherwise, there is a possibility of their fleeing away. That's why they are kept in judicial custody. So, what happened? That after the treatment, he became fit, and now the hospital, the doctors wrote to the jail authorities two times, first in 1967 and then in 1996, that Marshall was fit to stand trial, but still there was no response from the jail authorities, and Marshall was remained in that hospital only, and that was his judicial custody. He was not a free man because he was under trial. So, Machal Lolung was released in July 2005, and when he was released, he was 77 years old. Just consider, when he entered the hospital, at that time he was 23. He was under trial, he was in judicial custody. Uh, mm, mm, 54 years has been spent, and his case never came up for hearing, and just for the charge, just for the crime of causing grievous injury, he spent 54 years of his life in judicial custody. So this is the situation. This is what is this? This is the violation of the fundamental right, which has been guaranteed by our constitution. The constitution gives us right to life and liberty, and under this right to life and liberty comes the um, right to fair and speedy trial. So, in this case, this right has been curtailed. The person is the Macha Lulung is not entertaining his right to free and speedy trial. And how he became free? He was freed when a team appointed by National Human Rights Commission intervened after an inspection of the under trials in the state. There was an inspection of under trials, and this inspection was done by National Human Rights Commission. And when by the intervention of this commission only, that Macha Lulung became free. In this situation, what we find, if there was not an inspection done by National Human Rights Commission, then in that case it may be that Majalanum could have died in judicial custody only. So this is the violation of our fundamental rights. Much's entire life was wasted because a proper trial against him never took place. Our constitution gives every citizen the right to life and liberty. This means that every citizen must also have the right to fair and speedy trial. Much's case shows that what happens when rights granted by the constitution are not available in practice. Constitution is guaranteeing us right, but actually in actual practice we are not able to use that right. So, in the case of first instance, also there was violation of rights provided in the constitution, but it was challenged in the court As a result, workers could get what was due to them in the form of their rightful wages. The Constitution guarantees of the right against exploitation ensure justice to these workers. So the construction workers about which we were talking first, they were able to get justice. Why? Because there was violation of there was violation of their fundamental right of right against exploitation, and this was ensured by the judiciary. So this is the utility of Bill of Rights. If our Constitution is guaranteeing us rights, fundamental rights, then no authority can deprive us of that right. If someone, if any individual person, or if any government authority, or if any private organization is depriving us of our right, then we can go directly to the Supreme Court, and in this way, our rights are ensured. So, this is the importance of Bill of Rights. Uh, in our when India was an when India was a colony of British Empire. At that time, the British rule was highly exploitative and discriminatory, and because of that, there was demand from the very beginning. There was demand for rights of people of India, and in this regard, we need to mention the Motilal Nehru Committee, which had demanded a Bill of Rights as far back as in 1928. So there was huge demand for rights of people, and that is the reason when our constitution was in the process of making and the Constituent Assembly came into existence, there was no difference of opinion regarding inclusion of fundamental rights in our constitution, and our constitution listed the rights that which are especially protected, and these are called fundamental rights. These rights are called fundamental. Fundamental means they are very much important, and because of its importance, the constitution has separately listed them and made special provision for their protection, made a special provision for their in order to ensure all the people the rights. So these are fundamental because they are important. They are listed in the separately listed in the constitution. The fundamental rights are so important that the constitution itself ensure that they are not violated by the government also. No government has the authority to violate the fundamental rights of the people. Now, we see that there are two types of right. One type of right is fundamental right, and the another type of right is legal rights. There is big difference between these fundamental rights and ordinary legal rights. What we see that fundamental rights are protected and guaranteed by the constitution of the country. They are mentioned in the constitution of the country, while legal rights are protected and enforced by ordinary law. So there is legal rights are not mentioned in the constitution. They are protected and enforced by ordinary law only. Then there is another difference also. What we see that ordinary rights, if there is need to change the ordinary legal rights, then they can be changed by the legislature by ordinary process of lawmaking. Whatever process is followed by the legislature in order to make a law, and the same process using the same process, the law can be changed by the parliament. But if there is need to change the fundamental rights, it cannot be changed only by the act of parliament, but it can be changed only by the amendment of the constitution. In order to change the fundamental right, we need to amend the constitution. So this is the next difference. And then again, there is one more difference, that no organ of the government can act in a manner that violates them. As we can see that judiciary has the power and responsibility to protect the fundamental rights from violation by action of the government. Executive as well as legislative actions can be declared illegal by the judiciary if these violate the fundamental right or restrict them in an unreasonable manner. However, fundamental rights are not absolute or unlimited. Government can put reasonable restrictions on the exercise of our fundamental right. So here, one more difference is between the legal rights and fundamental rights are that if our judiciary has the power and responsibility to protect the fundamental rights, and but ordinary rights are not protected by the judiciary. If our executive or legislative pass any act or take any decision which is against the fundamental rights of people, then in that case, what happens that our judiciary declares that act of legislature or the decision of executive as illegal. So, in this way, we see that they are enforced and guaranteed by the judiciary. And now we will have a look on the Bill of Rights of South Africa. In the South African Constitution, Bill of Rights is there, and we will discuss about it. The South African Constitution was inaugurated in December 1996. Its creation and promulgation took place at a time when South Africa still faced the threat of a civil war after the dissolution of the apartheid government. You have studied about the problem of South Africa in your class ninth textbook under the chapter democracy. In South Africa, there was existing the discriminatory rule between the on the basis of color of the skin, and that was called apartheid. And a war, a long battle was fought by the people of Africa in the leadership of Nelson Mandela, and they became a free country in the year 1994. And when they became free, uh, the situation was not very cannot be said to be satisfactory, because there was atmosphere of fear and suspicion among both the communities, the blacks and the whites were completely settled in that country, and they were not going anywhere after the end of their rule. They were still living in that country only, and there was an atmosphere of fear that the blacks now can take revenge of the whatever atrocity, whatever exploitation was being done by the whites. So in these circumstances, the constitution of South Africa was made, and now what we see that the South African constitution says that its Bill of Rights is a cornerstone of democracy in South Africa. There is a extended list of rights of people in South Africa, and this Bill of Rights actually this Bill of Rights is the basis of democracy in South Africa. It forbids discrimination on the grounds of race, gender, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, age, disability, religion, consign, beliefs, culture, language, and birth. Uh, 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 the Constitution of South Africa guarantees Bill of Rights to the people, and this Bill of Rights forbids any kind of discrimination on any ground. There should not be any discrimination. and it grants perhaps the most extensive range of rights to the citizen. It must be in your knowledge that the Constitution of South Africa grants almost the most extensive range of rights to the citizens. And a special constitutional court enforce the rights enshrined in the Constitution. For the enforcement of the rights, there is a special constitutional court. So now we are discussing some of the rights which are given in the Constitution. These are Constitution of South Africa: right to dignity, right to privacy, right to fair labor practices, right to healthy environment and right to protection of environment, right to adequate housing, right to health care, food, water and social security, children's right, right to basic and higher education, right of cultural, religious and linguistic communities, right to information. So these are very extensive rights which are given to the people in South Africa. Now we are coming to the end of this segment, and here you need to check your progress. In this, you can see compare the fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution with the Bill of Rights in the South African Constitution. Make a list of rights that are common to both the constitutions, available in South Africa but not in India, clearly granted in South Africa but implicit in the Indian Constitution. So you are supposed to make three lists. In the first list, you have to write those rights which are present in both the constitution of India as well as constitution of South Africa. In this we can say that right to fair labor practices. In India we find right against exploitation. Both are same. Then there is a children's right. This right also comes under right against exploitation, because our constitution prohibits any kind of engagement of children below 14 years of age in hazardous activities. So these are children's right. This is also same. Then a right to basic and higher education, though in our original constitution we were not having this right, through constitutional amendment this right has been included in our fundamental rights. Now we have right to education. All the children up to the age of 14 must get free and compulsory education. It is our fundamental right. Then right of cultural, religious and linguistic communities. This is also the right which is present in Indian constitution. And then right to information in India. A right to information is not a fundamental right, but it is a legal right. Now we are supposed to prepare, our first list is prepared. Now we are supposed to prepare the second list, in which we have to see those rights which are given in the South African Constitution but not given in the Indian Constitution, such as right to privacy. It is not there in the Constitution of India. Then right to healthy environment and right to protection of environment. This is also not given in the Constitution of India. Right to adequate housing. It is also not there in the in our Constitution. Right to health care, food, water, and social security. These rights are also not there in the Constitution. Then right to information is also not there in our constitution. Now we have to find those rights. Now you have to understand what it is, what it wants to say. We have to list those rights which are clearly granted in South Africa. Okay, but in Indian constitution these rights are not clearly given to the people, but they are hidden. They are hidden under the under other some other rights. Not the name is not there, but by the interpretation, judiciary has interpreted various rights, and these interpretation judiciary has extended the scope of rights, and in this way many rights have been included under one category of right. For example, in our constitution there is we don't have any right to adequate housing or health care, food, water, social security. But what we see that during the interpretation of the rights, our Supreme Court has extended the scope of right to life. If our constitution is guaranteeing us right to life, it means it also includes right to livelihood, right to safe drinking water, right to health care. All these are included in that right. So it is clearly given in the constitution of South Africa, right to adequate housing, right to healthcare, food, water, and social security. But these are not given clearly in Indian constitution, but it is implicit. Okay, then there is right to dignity. It is given in the constitution of South Africa in a clear manner, but in Indian context, we see that this type of right is not given to the people, but actually people are given different kinds of freedom, right to freedom, freedom of movement, freedom of uh, occupation, freedom of practicing any religion. Then people are also supposed to be equality, right to equality is also there. So these all rights are given to people in order to um, give them a life of dignity. So, right to dignity is also there in our constitution, but it is not in a clear terms, it is implicit. So, now your all the three lists are prepared, and now we will discuss the various categories of rights which are given in the Indian constitution, and it will be discussed in tomorrow's class. And now I am closing this class.